For 2 weeks only, buy the Zombie Chronicles poster pack. A link is down below. Welcome to another episode of The Real Life. This is a series where we take a look at zombie maps and try to explore the depth, hidden meaning, secrets, and mythology that are hidden throughout the maps. If you play Call of Duty Zombies, one of the things Treyarch loves to do is infuse mythology and history into their maps so that people can explore them and understand them on a deeper level. It gives the maps more depth and makes them less surface, and you can look throughout all of Call of Duty Zombies and find this in almost every single map. Today, we're going to be looking at Origins. We're not going to necessarily be going into the battle that Origins surrounds. I instead want to talk about all of the gods that are infused into this map. Origins is interesting because it's kind of based around these four godlike figures. There are statues of them, there are legends and stories about them that are passed down, and then as you play the map, almost everything is named after a god from some culture's mythology. So let's take a look at the giant robots, for example. We have Thor, Odin, and Freya. These gods are all from Norse mythology, and it makes sense because these giant robots are the creations of Germans. So the Germans and a lot of their mythology really comes from Norse mythology, and this is where the inspiration for the names Thor, Odin, and Freya come from. So Thor, of course, is probably the most famous of all the Norse gods thanks to Marvel, but he is basically that famous hammer-wielding god. He's the god of thunder and lightning, and you can see his robot walking across the map. We also have Odin, who walks across the map, and Odin within Norse mythology is the god of healing and death. The final god that we have in the form of a giant robot is Freya. Freya is the goddess of love, beauty, and fertility. And because they are German robots, it seems fitting for them to be named after Norse gods. Now what about the staves? Because the staves actually have a pretty interesting history behind them and the gods they're named after. When you think about wonder weapons in Black Ops 2, you've got some pretty iconic wonder weapon names. They're quick to remember, they roll off the tongue easily. Think the jet gun, the sliquifier, the paralyzer, the ray gun Mark II. Everybody knows those names, nobody forgets them. And then we get Origins. Origins had 4 unique wonder weapons with very obscure names, so obscure and kind of out there, and they didn't follow any conventional naming pattern. As a result, everybody just called them by their nicknames: the lightning staff, the fire staff, the ice staff, the wind staff. Nobody actually ever called them or really cared to remember their real names, which is unfortunate because their real names actually reference a lot of history and have a bit of hidden meaning behind them, and you can kind of get a better idea of how those wonder weapons work when you understand their names. Let's start with the Staff of Lightning, also known as Kamat's Bite. For this one, you're going to have to dig into the mythology of the Philippines. Filipino mythology tells a story of a god named Tadlakan. Tadlakan was the god of thunder. He owned a dog named Kamat. Kamat was essentially the dog of thunder. And what Tadlakan would do is order his dog Kamat to bite people, and they both sort of had the same electrical lightning properties or abilities that you might expect to come from a god of thunder. So that's where the name Kamat's Bite comes from. It comes from the dog of thunder biting people, and it's not just kind of a random name like Kamat's Bite. It's like, oh, you're going to get bit by electricity. No, this actually references a lot of Filipino history right here, or Filipino mythology, shall I say. Now let's move on to the Fire Staff, also known as Kazuki's Blood, and I probably mispronounced that one, and I'm just going to clarify now as I go into the history behind this one. I'm probably going to butcher a lot of names. He is the spirit of fire, essentially, in Japanese mythology, and legend goes that when he was born, he actually burned his mother, Izanami, causing her death. His father, Izanagi, in his grief, beheaded him with his sword, and this cut his body into 8 pieces, which became 8 volcanoes. The blood that dripped off onto his sword created a number of deities, including the sea god, Watsuzumi, and the rain god, Kurakami. So his blood has a lot of abilities, and when his body was cut into 8 pieces, it created 8 different volcanoes, and that's where the name Kazuki's Blood actually comes from. His blood has a lot of powers, it has a lot of abilities, it has the ability to create life, and his body as a whole can create several volcanoes, and this is where the idea of having a staff that sort of spurts out all these balls of fire comes from. And that's why the Fire Staff is named after him. He is the spirit of fire and has the ability to create both life and volcanoes. The next staff we'll be discussing is the Staff of Wind, also known as Borea's Fury. For this one, we'll be diving into Greek mythology, which is somewhere that Jason Blundell loves to pull from. Think Mob of the Dead. It's littered with references to Greek mythology, and they come back for origins in the form of Boreas fury. Borea was the Greek god of wind. Characteristically, it was a very strong and violent-tempered god, one that could be set off easily, and when you do so, you would receive his fury and his wrath. That's where the name comes from. Borea is, of course, the god of wind, and the fury calls and harkens back to his very violent and easily set off temper, and if you were to do so, you would feel his fury, which you receive in the form of his staff, the Staff of Wind. The final staff is the Ice Staff, also known as Ol's Arrow. To understand Ol, what we need to do is dive back into Norse mythology. Ol is also known as Oller and Olin by many different sources, and the story goes is that he was an excellent archer, and that's where the name Ol's Arrow comes from. It's a reference to his ability to be such a good archer. Here's the tricky part. So as you do a lot of digging into Ol, you'll find that he's one of those gods that we don't actually know much about. In fact, there's a lot of conflicting sources, and unlike many other gods, you can't really pin him down into one specific role. People have and people have tried, but we don't have very good sources and information on Ol. And the trickiest thing in my research was coming across anything that referenced kind of winter or ice or snow or just maybe coldness. So I'm not exactly sure why Ol was pinned as the god of ice or the person to represent the ice staff, but the name Ol's Arrow is definitely a reference to his ability as an archer. Now this last bit isn't actually a staff, but it's something that is referenced on every staff, and this is when you hit left on the D-pad and suddenly you have the bit of the end of the staff that allows you to revive people, also known as Sekhmet's Vigor. And this is a reference to Egyptian mythology. What you have is Sekhmet, who is the Egyptian goddess of healing, also known as the Powerful One. So it's very fitting that the staff that allows you to revive, or the part of the staff that allows you to revive your teammates at a distance, would be named after a god of healing. So that's where that part of every staff comes from. It's a reference to Egyptian mythology. Origins is very unique compared to other maps when you think about all the history and hidden meaning within it. Most maps, what they do is they will take one or two things from one specific source. Mob of the Dead pulled from Greek mythology, Shadows of Evil pulled from Lovecraft, where Origins pulled from many different areas. You have Norse mythology, you have Greek mythology, Filipino mythology, Japanese mythology. All of it combines into one map. And when you think about a map like Origins, it's very fitting. Origins is when our four characters from four completely different walks of life meet for the first time. You have a Japanese soldier, a Russian soldier, a German soldier, an American soldier. And while they are in many ways opposed to one another, they are also united. And Origins has these 4, 5, 6 different gods from all sorts of different walks of life and parts of the world coming together to create one map. And it's a pretty good design choice from Jason Blundell and the rest of the Treyarch team to really pull from many different aspects for Origins. It's a very fitting map to do that in, and this is where a lot of the history to that map really comes from. It's not so much the battle itself and the fact that it's set in World War I, it's all of the mythology that was hidden inside many of the names of the staffs and the giant robots. That's going to wrap things up for this episode of The Real Life. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. If you did, maybe give it a like, possibly subscribe for more. I'm always covering the zombie storyline, so if you enjoyed this video, I'm sure you'll enjoy the next one. I'm going to go, though. Have a wonderful day, and bye.